Hey there, welcome to episode 108 of the Social Business Engine podcast, the podcast where I invite thought leaders from all industries to share their real-world expertise on social and digital communications best practices. I'm Bernie Borges from Find and Convert and your host of the Social Business Engine podcast. On today's episode, you are going to meet Andrew Spoth, Digital Marketing Director and Head of Social Media at CA Technologies. On this episode, you're going to learn how CA Technologies, a global provider of software and solutions in the application economy, is harnessing the reach and business potential of its advocates, namely its employees. Now, this episode is sponsored by our very own Social Business Workshop for Business Development. This online workshop is delivered in both group and one-on-one coaching sessions. It's designed for business development teams who want to learn how to use social media channels to build key relationships that improve sales results. To learn more about this online workshop, visit socialbusinessengine.com/workshops. And now, here's my interview with Andrew Spoth, Digital Marketing Director and Head of Social Media at CA Technologies. Andrew, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Pleased to be here, Bernie. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, Andrew, why don't we begin our conversation with just a brief and high-level introduction or description of CA Technologies for those in my listening audience that may not be familiar with your brand.
All right, happy to do so. CA Technologies is a large global company that helps other companies thrive in what we call the application economy. Mm-hmm. And so this means planning and prioritizing their projects, developing and testing apps, deploying those apps, connecting and securing their enterprise, and managing and monitoring all of that. We're a company with a long history of experience, operate in dozens of countries, and a very technically savvy group of people. We have over 12,000 employees that I have the pleasure of working with, and digital marketing is a big part of our go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, so now that we have that background on CA Technologies, let's talk about how CA, as a large technology company, how have you been transforming from doing social media to being a social business?
From doing social media to becoming a social business, it has been there have been several stages in the evolution. I'll touch on the key ones. Mm-hmm. One was defining how social media can help the business. Several components to that. One is social networks can be a way to connect a company in new ways internally to communicate efficiently, effectively as a company across different offices and regions. And then social media can help us do the same with our customers and prospects and influencers. And then what we did is we defined success with social media. How do we know if social media is working for us? And so we came up with a hierarchy and some key performance indicators, and then rolled up all the cool things we can do with the platforms into those KPIs. So a big part of it was looking at what social can do for the enterprise, for a go-to-market strategy, and then defining success, and then bringing together the resources to make that happen. So that goes beyond just communications and marketing. Mm-hmm. Social, as your listeners I'm sure will know, is a way to communicate directly with customers, to manage customer support, to gather intelligence on the market, on competitors, on what people are interested in. It has many different facets to it. It's been fascinating to see how the market and how companies figure out social. Mm-hmm. We call it chameleon, or different ways of looking at it. So it is multifaceted, and it has become an integral part of business. So much so that people are even using the word social media less because it's become embedded. It has become embedded in how we do business.
Okay. Now, I want to cover something, and I want to make sure we cover this before we run out of time, because there's so many thoughts and questions that are running through my head right now, just based on that, sort of setting the framework for our conversation. But I know that before we recorded, you mentioned that paid social is an element. And given the background you just provided, Andrew, on how you defined the journey from social media to social business, what element does paid play into your social business strategy?
Well, paid started to become important, I'd say around 5-6 years ago. Facebook advertising, Twitter advertising, and then LinkedIn has developed advertising products for social marketers. And so the first thing we see there is, okay, this will help us get scale and reach and impressions and clicks. Mm-hmm. So it has become very important in order to compete and in order to reach more people than we can organically. Mm-hmm. But I have a confession to make, and this is a public confession. I don't like the term paid social media. I don't like it because it sounds like capitulation. Okay. So the term that we like to use internally is hybrid social media. Okay. Hybrid meaning an orchestrated effort between the owned social content, so what we publish on our own channels, the earned, which is the mentions, which we drive with our influencers, with our employees, and then paid. Mm-hmm. And there are many ways you can leverage those three components off of each other mm-hmm. to have a truly hybrid program. And at the end of the day, that means lower costs per engagement, hopefully reaching the right audiences, reaching them quickly at the scale you need. So that's our paid strategy. Okay. Besides reach, though, one of the things to keep in mind too, that it can sometimes drive higher quality traffic than organic because of the amazing targeting that some of these channels for us. Right.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I don't think that was a painful confession for you, because I completely agree. The whole owned, earned, and paid hybrid model is really the best mix of all of them coming together. And then your point about being able to target for high quality traffic is spot on. So let's come back to then, now that we have that kind of picture painted, let's come back to how you've been leveraging social business among your employees. Because I really like one of the things you said very early in your response to my question is you talked about how social networks can connect the company internally. So obviously that involves employees, and that involves some kind of a rollout and management buy-in. So do you want to talk about how that's been going for you at CA?
Sure. There have been different waves of effort within CA. Some of it predates my time at the company, but we use Salesforce.com as a CRM, and that is coupled with Chatter, a platform which our sales reps use actively to communicate and collaborate. Mm-hmm. And so that was extended throughout the organization. So that was one platform, one mechanism. And since then, we've looked at a couple of other platforms as well in order to drive the internal social business. Okay.
And what kind of a process did you go through, Andrew, to actually roll it out, with 12,000 plus employees, multiple countries, probably multiple languages, I would suspect? How's that rollout gone in terms of adoption and the overall process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we have the perfect formula for that, but I can share how we approached it. Large technology investments typically or often are initiated by our IT department, similar to actually a lot of our clients. Mm-hmm. And so they were at the core when it came to rolling out Chatter mm-hmm. across the organization. And then they partnered with the sales leadership, sales operations, communications, and then the social media team once the social media team was formed, to try to make the most of the platform. Adhere to best practices, train employees on how to use it, monitor the usage, and so on. So that's how we approached it, and that's also similar to how other technologies have been layered on top of that over time.
Right. And did you notice any, from an observation standpoint, have you observed any kind of trends or any kind of patterns or any kind of successes as it's been rolling out, either among departments or groups or maybe even regions?
We are admittedly still trying to figure out how to make the most of it. The usage,
it's a journey, right?
It totally is.
Yeah.
It totally is. And there are parallels between that and our public social media efforts. I do see us actually spending more time and more resources on the public social media efforts because it can be tied more to revenue and
Right.
traffic and
Right.
leads. Whereas the internal one, the KPI is perhaps more efficiency and internal communication metrics, which are not as directly tied to revenue or not
Right.
as immediate. So some of the urgency that you see with the marketing programs, because you have quarterly targets,
Right.
isn't necessarily there internally. But we've done training sessions, some of which were led by the social media team,
Mm-hmm.
and we've brought in experts from the vendors themselves to give us coaching and show us what's worked in other organizations in order to benchmark how you're using it and how to incentivize participation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So one important element of getting employees to really embrace using social for communication and for advocacy is for them to keep it human. So how are you achieving that? How are you getting people at CA to embrace being social while also keeping it human?
Sure. There are two main things, two ways we're doing that. One is we have a variety of training programs, internal training programs for sales reps, for product marketing managers, for executives on how to use social media and how to make it their own, how to find the right tools to make it easier and more efficient. So the social media training focuses on some of the nuts and bolts of how to do it, how to craft messages, how to engage with people. But as we are communicating with these stakeholders, we also give examples. And there, the tone is very important. The tone that we use through our branded accounts and that our executives use, that gives the market or our customers or our prospects a taste of what it's going to be like to have a relationship with us, a business relationship. So it's so important to recognize that and then make sure that we are being authentic and professional in our presence. So tactically speaking, this means, okay, if you're sharing something from our company, which is great if you are, try to add your own opinion on it or your own layer or some context so that it's not just a regurgitation of the marketing message, but rather a carrying of it and transferring it and perhaps curating it for your own network.
Right. I once recorded a podcast with Ed Turpening from Altimeter Group, and the whole podcast was devoted to governance. And, I learn from every one of my podcasts. I'm learning right now in this conversation with you, Andrew. And what I learned in that podcast recording with Ed Turpening was that governance is actually a good thing. And so I'll ask you, what kind of governance program, I don't know if program is the right word, right? But what kind of governance have you provided to your 12,000 plus employees at CA as it relates to embracing social?
Sure. It starts with the onboarding when we hire employees. We have a course, a prepackaged course which they take on social media best practices, and then coupled with that, we have created with our compliance team and our legal team, so a one-pager of the do's and don'ts of using social media when you're working at CA Technologies. These are things which will help them represent the company well, make sure that we as a company are being FTC compliant, and that we just minimize the risks associated with unleashing our advocates into the market.
Right, right. That's excellent, especially the one pager. That's fantastic. What about content? How do employees participate in content? Can they produce their own content, or do you produce all the content for them? What's your plan there?
Content is really the core when it comes to our social media advocacy program. And luckily, we have a lot of content at our disposal. We have several. We actually have a content marketing team that spends a lot of time creating original content, which we design to kind of spark the interest of our prospects. And this is a lot of not product information, but information which will appeal to an audience which is broader than our customers. Thought leadership content, talking about market trends in our industry. Mm-hmm. And so we take that content from different sources, internal, external as well, and then we curate that, and we use a platform called GagleAmp to consolidate that and serve that up to our employees. And so that's the core of our program. Once our employees have that content there, then they can add some of their own commentary to that to personalize the message. They can choose which groups they want to belong to, for example, which business units, or if they're in a certain region, they'll find localized content as well. So that's the engine which drives a lot of this and drives participation.
Okay, they might find localized content too. Now, when they find localized content, especially in different regions of the world, do you have a process whereby they submit it for approval, or do they just append it to what you've provided to them or distribute it to them?
Right. Well, this content curation work is managed by a core team of individuals, and so the social media team is a center of excellence, and then working with the regional leads in social media or social media leads in each of the business units. And so the bulk of the content is sourced that way, but this platform that we use also allows the advocates, the employees that have signed up for this, to suggest content, and that's good. That's good because they may see some things, or they may have that they may know of a third-party article which we didn't have a chance to see, and we can utilize that as part of the content mix.
Right. Cool. So they can find original content and then submit it in. Okay. What about executives? I have a lot of fun exploring this with different companies, Andrew. So if you want to, you've already given us one confession here. So since we're on a roll with confessions, do you have any confessions as it relates to, and that's good or otherwise, as it relates to executives embracing social at CA in terms of engaging and being active and so forth?
I would say for the most part, I feel lucky. I am lucky. There's a lot of interest in social media amongst the senior leadership team at the company. We do need to work on the social media profiles of some of them, but I believe
here we have it, folks. Confession number 2.
But I would think that many companies struggle with this.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's great. No, we do have a lot of enthusiasm about social, and so what we're doing is trying to make sure that energy, what they're hearing from the marketplace, that social and digital is important, that we can make sure that we funnel that enthusiasm, those resources, and focus that into a cohesive strategy, so that we're not going in 3 different directions, but rather have a solid plan and can turn that interest into business results for us.
Yep, absolutely. Excellent. So, Andrew, we are at the point in the podcast where I am now going to attempt to summarize the key highlights from our conversation. So I'm going to run through that, and then I'm going to ask you if you would elaborate on any points that I made that you'd like to elaborate on, or maybe even fill in on any holes that I may have left out in my summary. All right, so here we go. And we began our conversation with an introduction of CA Technologies, a very large software company in the application economy with lots of different technology products and services that I frankly cannot describe. You operate in dozens of countries. You have more than 12,000 employees and a very mature company. You've been around for a long time. We talked about the journey that CA is on from social media to social business, and you started by really defining how can social media help the business, right? Which is what we like to talk about here on the Social Business Engine podcast, right? That's our theme. You talked about how social networks can connect the company internally. I really, really love that. I feel strongly that brands that get that and get the fact that the internal connection should happen before the external connection in terms of really connecting the dots on that, succeed the most. And so starting with that is fantastic. And you also talked about how social can help you connect with customers and prospects and influencers. And then you talked about how you define success and the KPIs and then identified the resources to help you achieve success. You talk about how social is a way that you can communicate directly to customers and prospects, how you can gather intelligence, and it's really a multifaceted way of communicating in multiple ways, back and forth, again, both externally and internally. We talked a little bit about paid social and how you recognized that about 5 or 6 years ago, paid was something that really needed to happen. However, it is really not just paid, it's more of a hybrid model. And the hybrid meaning that it's a hybrid of owned, earned, and paid content. And by doing paid in a very targeted way, you can not only lower your cost of engagement and cost of reach, but you can also drive higher quality outcomes because you can be very targeted, especially when you're doing it in combination with owned and earned. We talked about the importance of internal collaboration with your employees and social, and how you're using technologies from Salesforce and Chatter to accomplish that, and how that whole investment really was driven by IT, and how you also partnered with not only IT, but the IT partnered with sales leadership and the social media team, and that it's really been this journey of really focusing on how to use social both internally as well as outside as a public communication and engagement channel, and how the internal metrics are more about efficiency, but the external metrics are more about how is it impacting the business, and specifically how can it impact sales. We talked about how you're creating a program, or how you've created a program that really keeps it human. And it starts with internal programs, training programs, teaching people how to do it efficiently, how to craft messages. You provide lots of examples. You really put a lot of emphasis on tone and really giving the marketplace a taste of what it's like to have a relationship with people at CA. You encourage people to add their own opinion and their own intellectual addition to content. We talked a little bit about governance and how it starts with onboarding, and how you provide a course on social media best practices, and you provide just a one-pager on do's and don'ts. And I don't mean to say just. What I mean by that is it's not a 10-page, overwhelming document. It's a one-pager. I think that is fantastic, and how you really are encouraging and teaching people to represent the company well. And then, of course, we talked about the importance of content. Content is at the core of your social media advocacy program, and how it's all managed by your team, the Social Media Center of Excellence team. And you've got a content marketing team that's focused on creating original content. And that content really spans a variety of topics that include technical as well as market trends and thought leadership, and how you source it from different places. And then you serve it up to employees through technology. Specifically, you mentioned you're using GaggleAmp, and how those employees can access that really around the world, but then they can also potentially find localized content that they may submit for review and also for distribution. And then the last thing we discussed, Andrew, was the role of executives in the social advocacy program. And you said you're very lucky because they're really enthusiastic about social. And what they're really focused on in collaboration with you and your social media team is a cohesive strategy, and a cohesive strategy that really drives business outcomes. So that's my summary. What would you like to either add or elaborate on or fill in any holes?
Well, Bernie, that really covered it well. I think people in my role are wondering, where is social headed over the next couple of years, and how do these different elements of social fit into it? For example, employee advocacy, social media measurement, sales, and what is social really, really good at? And I think, I was having a conversation yesterday with our head of marketing technology. Really, really nice brainstorming session, and we were describing as two things. I mean, social is good at spreading a brand message for awareness, but it can be really effective at creating moments that matter with an individual. Customer support case or surprising and delighting customer. And so how does this fit into a strategy? How do you really continue to drive this? And so I'll just take 2 minutes here to quickly define the 5 steps in our social media marketing maturity. And I think your listeners will relate to this.
Cool.
So going back to the genesis of social, and when brands started to latch onto this, that stage was all about developing a presence on the right social networks and then tracking how that presence is performing. So there, a KPI is audience and how you're developing that audience and getting opt-ins, the social equivalent of opt-ins. Number 2, adding on to that, building upon that was, okay, can we use social media to drive engagement? Engagement meaning clicks and shares and traffic to the website. And now, almost all companies can already do that as well. You can track that in the social networks. It's all baked in now. Phase 3, and this is more recent, is can you tie that activity then to sales, to business results, or to moving people in a B2B setting, in a complex sale? Can you drive people down the funnel using social? And so using a marketing automation platform and coding the links, you can attribute traffic and conversions and also pipeline to all of this hard work that you're doing on social. But that's not everything. Because that social is also about having conversations, one-on-one conversations with the right people at the right time. So that's where what we see as phase 4 coming in, the connected conversations. We know it's the right thing to do, but how do you orchestrate that? How do you connect it to the right lead and right contact in your CRM? So that's something that we've just started to experiment with over the last year. To see how that's working, how we can correlate sales or an accelerated sales process to reaching out to that person on social. But I think beyond that, then we need to look at, well, it's not just the brand that's going to do that. It's going to be the sales rep within our company that's going to reach out, or perhaps one of our thought leaders. We should actually orchestrate that, and we should track that centrally so we can test it, optimize it, and then refine our strategy. So that's I think something which is still very difficult to do today in terms of measurement and doing it well or doing it in an orchestrated fashion. But it's going to, once we can do that, it's going to further demonstrate and the value of social to the organization.
And specifically, Andrew, you're referring to measure the impact of connected conversations, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and something you said in the one before that, which was, I wrote it down as sales impact and using marketing automation, and you used the word attribute. And that was the first thing that I thought of when you were describing that, is that it can be difficult. There's ways to do attribution, but sometimes it's impossible to be able to attribute one specific touch to sales impact, especially in a complex B2B environment like CA Technologies, where sales cycles are long. The value of a contract is probably pretty high, and again, long sales cycles. So that attribution is more complex, which even adds another layer of complexity to measure the impact of connected conversations. But one of the ways that I look at it is, there's the evolution of technology. Once upon a time, executives somewhere said, we can't give employees telephones because we can't control those conversations. And then once upon a time, in our lifetime, executives said, we can't give every employee email because we can't control those conversations. And then more recently, executives said, we can't allow employees to use social because we can't control those conversations. Now we're all saying, we want those conversations to happen and to be connected, but how do we measure them?
Indeed. And the measurement leads to doing it better. We know that we need to do it, we ought to do it, and it's happening ad hoc. Literally email message, hey, can you reach out to that person? Or a sales rep saying, hey, I can, isn't this a great case study that I've got here on social selling? And so you're seeing it happening, but it's not fully connected or orchestrated yet. So we got some exciting times ahead, I think, in terms of how social is going to become a significant driver of business.
Yep, absolutely. Well, then I think that's a great segue to the little wrap-up point that I have with you, Andrew, and that is I'd like to ask, where would you like to send my listeners online to learn more about what you're doing at CA Technologies in social business?
So much. We have a lot of online properties, but I would invite you to go to ca.com. Our homepage has the latest and greatest. If you go to ca.com/social, you'll see an overview of our social media properties, and I hope you like what you see there. And then personally, the best place to stay in touch with yours truly would be my Twitter account at Andrew Spoth.
At Andrew Spoth. Terrific. Well, Andrew, my listeners know that we will have both of those linked up in our show notes page at socialbusinessengine.com. And Andrew, thank you so much for jumping on this podcast with me here today and for sharing the social business journey at CA. It's really a fantastic conversation, fantastic to learn about where you've been, where you are, and like you said, the exciting times ahead.
Thank you, Bernie. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Andrew Spoth, Digital Marketing Director and Head of Social Media at CA Technologies. As I mentioned, this episode is sponsored by our very own Social Business Workshop for Business Development. To learn more about this online workshop, visit socialbusinessengine.com/workshops. And I want to ask you if you're subscribed by email to get our weekly podcast updates that we send every Friday morning. If you're not and you'd like to be, just visit our subscribe page at our website at socialbusinessengine.com. And hey, while you're there, would you consider writing a review of our podcast on iTunes and just tell other people what you think about this podcast and help others discover it? We've got a direct link to our podcast on iTunes from the website, and it's right there at socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes. And lastly, I invite you to engage with me on Twitter. My handle is at Bernie Borges. This podcast is also on Twitter as well as Instagram with the handle at SBEngine, and follow our hashtag SBEShow. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank my guest once again, Andrew Spoth, Digital Marketing Director and Head of Social Media at CA Technologies. This is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.